That's kind of, I wish there were blackboards.
Oh, look at you.
No way. It's like you've done this before. Professional or
We
something.
match nicely,
I know,
too,
we really
black and
do.
blue.
That's very good.
Good. Check 1, 2. Hey, can you guys test my IFB? Yes, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Perfect. All right, you want to go out?
It is now. Yeah, it's on.
It is?
Yeah, because I can see he's got you muted at the console, but it's on and he's getting signal. But he can't, where you were standing, he can't see you.
Okay, got it.
I need to.
About it. And that Gabby Doolin case up in Kentucky, the girl who was murdered, the guy pled guilty, life instead of getting the death penalty.
Wow.
Timothy Madden. That's about it.
Question.
Yes.
Can I take a look at your belt packs?
Yes.
Everything looks like it's on and ready to go.
Do you not hear us? Or,
I hear myself.
well, that's good. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, well, there you go.
Okay, 6:50. I'm going to send our first welcomer
Please
out.
do.
Are y'all going at the same time, or are you going to come when Michael introduces you?
We'll come out.
I guess, yeah, we'll come with
Okay.
Michael.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we? Yeah. Go on out. Just kind of get eye contact with me. Go ahead and turn it on. You might need that to get ready. Okay. I'll meet you over your side, Michael.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. If I could ask everyone to go ahead and find your seats. Thank you. I'm Perry Molds, Vice President for Development and External Relations here at Belmont, and it's my honor to welcome all of you here to our campus and to the Trout Theater for tonight's mayoral runoff debate. Service to the Nashville community is a significant part of Belmont's mission, and so we take every opportunity we can to bring people together to engage in civil discourse about important issues. And many important issues will undoubtedly be discussed tonight. Those issues will affect the course of our city, and that affects the entire Belmont community. So we thank you for being part of this. We thank you for allowing us to take our part in educating the voters on a race that will undoubtedly affect Nashville's future for many, many years to come. I want to say thank you, too, to our moderators, Rory Johnston and Jessica Bliss. I want to thank the teams at the Tennessean and NewsChannel 5 for sponsoring tonight's event. And I want to thank you for taking the time to participate in this important event and for your investment in our community. So now I want to also introduce Michael Anastasi. Michael is the Vice President of News for the USA Today Network of Tennessee. Michael.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of you again. We're so happy that you're here tonight. Tonight's debate is actually about the 12th that the Tennessean has hosted or co-sponsored in the last 18 months or so, and it really is a manifestation of our profound commitment to informing the citizens of the communities that we serve, including, of course, most importantly, Nashville. I want to thank and really congratulate both of our candidates tonight. Thank them for their long histories of public service to this community. But most importantly, I want to thank their families for supporting both of them through their journeys up into including tonight. They would not be here, and I think they would be the first to tell you, without the support of their families. And so thank you. I know we have a number of them in the audience tonight. So I think it's about time to rumble here. So let's bring out our moderators, Rory Johnston of NewsChannel 5 and Jessica Bliss of the Tennessean.
Thank you, Michael. Can you all hear me? You can hear us. All right, we're mic'd up differently. Good evening, everyone. We're glad you are here. We'll go over a couple of ground rules before we go live on NewsChannel 5. We just ask, the primary thing is you remain as quiet as possible throughout this debate to allow each candidate the time to answer their questions. We have a specific format and we have a limited amount of time, just 1 hour.
Yeah. So each candidate will answer each question. They'll each get 90 seconds, but it'll be split up so that there's a time for rebuttal.
Yeah, it's going to be 60 seconds and then 90, 60, 30. Is that how we're doing it?
60, 90, 30.
She's got it better than I do. Each will get 90 seconds, so don't freak out on us. We're going to give them a fair time. But we do want to welcome the candidates at this point. That they can take the podium prior to our broadcast. So a warm round of applause for Mayor David Briley and Councilman John Cooper.
Hello, David. Good to see you. Good to see you.
So this is the awkward part. So we have about 5 minutes of just kind of talk amongst yourselves as we prepare for the broadcast. And they will cue you once we start on NewsChannel 5. You'll know when we start. So thanks again for being here. I hope you enjoy the evening. There we go.
Is she there?
Michelle, test 1, 2. Can you hear me? Yes. Hello.
There
Hi.
we go.
I did.
Live from the campus of Belmont University, this is
a test.
Election 2019.
Just give me a minute or 2 minutes. Michelle, when you can. I've got the out time, but I don't have the exact end. Whether we're going to go right at 7. 2 minutes.
Live from the campus of Belmont University, this is Election.
Just a test. Are we 2 minutes? What do we got? Okay. About 1 minute, everybody. Good time for me. Yep. Okay.
Live from the campus of Belmont University, this is Election 2019, Nashville Mayoral Debate. Presented by NewsChannel 5, the Tennessean, and Belmont University. Now, here are tonight's moderators, Rory Johnston and Jessica Bliss.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So glad you are with us. Welcome to the first televised debate of the 2019 mayoral runoff election.
Before we begin, we want to go over some of tonight's rules. Both candidates will be given a total of 90 seconds each to answer each question, but the responses will be broken up to give time for rebuttal.
And in the interest of time and fairness, the audience has been instructed to remain quiet except right now when we welcome the candidates. Nashville Mayor David Briley. And Metro Councilman at Large John Cooper.
Hello.
Gentlemen, good evening. We'll get right to it. One of the central issues in this campaign has been whether or not to raise property taxes. Many in Nashville say the city made a mistake when it failed to increase the property tax rate during the last reappraisal in 2017. Do you agree with that assessment, and would you support an increase in the property tax moving forward? We begin with you, Mayor Briley.
Well, thanks Rory, and thanks to everyone who is here tonight for caring about your city and tuning in to learn more about the direction we're about to go in. When I became mayor in March of 2018, I learned that the city's budget was out of whack. It was actually out of balance. Councilman Cooper, as the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, had sponsored and supported a budget that set the tax rate too low, that made promises that couldn't be kept, that didn't fund General Hospital fully, and really set us off on a negative course, in particular because we spent our reserves down to the bare minimum. Now, over the last 18 months, I've moved our city forward and gotten the budget under control. That budget is now a budget that this year we got a 4.5% increase to teachers. We fully funded all our obligations. We got 3% cost of living adjustment to all our employees. I've moved our city forward, and I'm willing to consider as we move forward whether or not we need to raise revenues to fund teacher pay and pay for our police officers as we move forward. I'm going to keep going, even though
That's good for now. Sorry about the timer issue.
I think that
The timer's a little bit off, but we appreciate it. Councilman Cooper, you have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you, Rory and Jessica. And I want to thank everybody for being here. This is our 23rd forum and our third debate here at Belmont. And I want to thank President Fisher and the students and faculty that make this possible, and for the opportunity provided by Channel 5 and the Tennessean to speak to you at home. No, I consistently no on taxes, and I have been consistently over time. And at the time, let me just say that when David was the vice mayor, he was very complimentary of me when I was budget and finance chair. And the city had $120 million of extra revenue, lots of revenue as we do now. And if he felt that we should be raising taxes, he's had 2 years to do that. The question for Nashville is to bring balance into our finances, including getting additional money from downtown revenues. Nashville is doing really well. Downtown can help contribute back as opposed to being subsidized, as has been our basic course in the last years. We're going to be an incredibly great city, and we're grateful for such an asset downtown that can begin to contribute back to things like teacher and police pay. This asset is going to make us the greatest city in the country in the next years ahead. And it's a great opportunity, and I want to thank everybody that helped make that possible. But now is the time for kind of a strategic readjustment for the city ahead, not raising taxes, which would be unfair to people whose costs have already gone up.
Mayor Briley, 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you. Well, it is disappointing that my opponent throughout this campaign has misled the city of Nashville about what we actually can and can't do with the resources that are generated from tourism downtown. Trust me, I have worked hard over the last 18 months, and I've gotten more than any other mayor from those revenues to support our city. But the fundamental truth is that if we want to fund our teachers, if we want to fund our police officers, if we want to take care of our neighborhoods, we can't take the property tax off the table like my opponent has just done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Earlier this month, the state comptroller sent a letter to each of you raising concerns about the city's budget and debt practices. Right now, the city of Nashville has more than $4.5 billion in debt. The state of Tennessee, by comparison, has $2 billion. What actions do you plan to take to address the state's concern? Councilman Cooper, we'll start with you.
Oh, the comptroller's letter is a big wake-up call. Very few counties or cities end up having such a letter. Last October, I began to really raise concerns about that. And the comptroller's letter is about why is our cash balances so low? How are we going to repay the debt? And also, is our budget balanced? And fundamentally, are we balancing the budget on using one-time sales that end up never really materializing? The only response is going to be revenue adjustments and real management increases. Interestingly, the letter requires a response before the next mayor takes office. This is an important time in the city to begin to work to rebalance finances. And for too long, Nashville practices, and I'm the person that wrote the August 1st referendum item now requiring us to publicly cite how much debt we have, because for too long, the lack of transparency have allowed the public to be confused about where our finances actually are.
Thank you, Mayor Briley. 90 seconds.
Thank you. So let's start with the facts. The letter that we received is essentially a political document, and I believe, it's my understanding, that Councilman Cooper and his conservative Republican friends on the council solicited it. So he certainly should know a fair amount about it. Now, let's look at something that's not political. Last year, we sold debt. To everyone who lives in the entire world, we sold debt, and it was rated by Moody's, one of the rating agencies. And they gave our city high marks. Our finances are, in fact, under control. And when the final budget is assessed at the end of this year, you'll see that our fund balances are actually up over last year. Now, I'm going to go back to the prior question about taxes, because my opponent is now saying he's going to come in and adjust revenues in order to deal with this particular issue. But he has already taken the only significant source of new revenue off the table. He talks out of both sides of his mouth.
Well, I know it's late in the political season and people forget all kinds of things. Let me just spend a moment and defend this. On this stage, months ago, I said, well, you can never take all taxes off the table. That's irresponsible. But there is revenue to be gotten, and it was my effort to begin to get some revenue back from the Music City Center. But as to the controller's letter, which is very serious, you recited, Jessica, the facts themselves. Look at our debt. It has doubled in the last 4 years, right? The facts themselves speak for themselves. It's not Republican and Democratic. I'm, of course, a longtime Democrat myself. It's dollars and cents. Are we being well managed? Are we on it?
Thank you.
All right, we want to continue on the budget. State law requires that the city has a balanced budget, but our current operating budget will have a $30 million shortfall unless the city moves forward with plans to privatize our parking meter system, which now appears unlikely. How do you plan to make up that money, and what specifically will you cut to balance the budget? Mayor Briley, 60 seconds.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying this. If my opponent is a Democrat, he ought to act like one, and he has not been acting like a Democrat. He ought to stand up on progressive issues that arise in our city, which he has refused to do. Now, when it comes to this year's budget, let me talk to you about the budget. There is money in there, not for privatization, but for modernization of our parking, and it is the right thing to do. What my opponent wants is for everybody who lives in Nashville to go downtown and to pay $20 for parking no matter what. Modernization improves the system. So if you live in our town and you want to go downtown, you can find a place to park for $2 or $3. I am convinced it's the right thing to do. Now, the budget that Councilman Cooper supported, proposed, sponsored just a few years ago included money in it as well. One-time money that didn't happen. What happens in that context is that you manage through it. That's what I've done for 18 months. I have gotten us past his budget by managing expenses, cutting expenses, and getting us to a point where the budget is balanced. That's what I'll continue to do as mayor.
90 seconds, Councilman.
Well, again, I disagree with almost all of this, and progressives and unions and teachers have supported me in this campaign. Now, as for parking meters, let's be clear. David, I believe, is for parking meter privatization. I am against it. I'm going not to go forward with that deal. We are going to find the money, and we are not going to inflict parking meter privatization. Again, trickle down and privatization are not progressive policies. We're not going to inflict this privatization on Nashville because a lot of those meters will end up in neighborhoods, and also downtown is going to need that right-of-way in order to create a great and vibrant downtown. This kind of management and mischaracterization of what's going on in our finances is part of how we got into this problem today. Thank you.
30 seconds.
Well, Councilman Cooper, you said something I agree with. You said, I disagree with almost everything. And that is the case. I mean, we know that no matter what comes up, you're going to say no. You're going to disagree. If it's not your opinion, it's the wrong opinion. Now, let's be clear. Nashville is lagging behind the rest of the country when it comes to the parking infrastructure we have. We have studied it for years. How are we going to improve it? This is the right approach for the city. A lot that has been said about it is mischaracterization that has taken place in the context of this political campaign.
Thank you. During this campaign, there's been a lot of talk about economic incentives to attract businesses to Nashville. Both of you have, to varying degrees, supported them in the past. When do you feel it's appropriate to offer a company tax breaks or other incentives to bring jobs to Music City? Councilman Cooper.
Oh, to me? Well, I think you have to do it very carefully and on a case-by-case basis. I've supported incentives, for example, in Southeast Nashville. It's a vibrant, growing area, and it is really, in some extent, our future, to create a live, work, play environment out in Southeast. As a lot of this effort shows, do you want one manager to drive 45 minutes, or do you want 500 workers to drive 45 minutes? So let's bring office uses to Southeast, and it's happening right now. The incentives to do that are very worthwhile. Now, in the meantime, for too long, we've coasted on incentives in downtown as the property values have exploded. And you really shouldn't be giving incentives on land that's worth $3 to $5, maybe even to $10 million an acre. At that point, the private market has to take care of itself and support itself. And it's a little bit old-fashioned when cities rely on incentives to support kind of the 1%, when we as a government need to be thinking about the rest of us.
Mayor Briley, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, Councilman Cooper supports incentives when they support him. He's been the only person up here who's ever gotten a tax incentive that's supported him financially. So it's clear he does support them sometimes. Now, as mayor, over the last 18 months, I've presented 2 economic incentive proposals to the city, and Councilman Cooper supported both of them. The way I look at it is Nashville cannot back down from competition with any other city in the country. And incentives are primarily about partnerships. Are we going to partner with this company as they come to Nashville? And I think occasionally we're going to have to do it. But the last job announcement I did here in Nashville, pilot.com, had 0 incentives in it. That's because we are in a position as a community where we can start to benefit from the investments we have made in the past. And that's what I have started doing as long as I've been mayor. Councilman Cooper complains a lot about tax increment financing. Notably, I have not proposed a single tax increment financing deal in this city as mayor, period. Now, set all that aside just for a minute. If we want to have jobs for our kids and grandkids, we cannot present a negative image of our city abroad. And the more that my opponent talks negatively about the direction of this city, about our finances, the harder it's going to be for us to provide those jobs for our kids and grandkids in the future.
Thank you.
Well, of course, the way not to talk negatively about our finances is to fix them. And my complaints about TIF money,
Quiet, please.
really, I'm so glad that the community, the county, has become aware of their occasional sort of misapplication. And I know it's late in the campaign, but really, I haven't gotten incentives. Now, I did some development in Williamson County, and anybody in Williamson County will tell you they don't do it there. And that's what Nashville needs to learn. We're a swan. We don't need to pay people to come here anymore. And our other comparable peer cities really don't. And let's learn from that lesson.
Thank you. On Friday, we reported that Metro Schools still has more than 170 classrooms without a permanent teacher. The district is struggling to recruit and retain teachers, many say because of poor pay and low morale. So what specifically can you do as mayor to ensure that MNPS can both recruit and retain the most effective teachers in our state? Mayor.
Sure. So that's a great question, and it's one of the most difficult and important questions in the city of Nashville. And pay and morale are the 2 big issues that we have to confront. On the pay side, I have made a commitment. I have made a commitment to the teachers, to the students, to the parents in this city that we are going to do a comprehensive pay plan. We are going to get our teachers in line. We are going to fund it no matter what. No matter what, we are going to get that funded because that is a critical element to making sure that we can recruit and retain the teachers we need. Now, on the flip side, there is a fundamental morale problem in our district. And it is in part because of decisions made by the board. I'll give you one good example quickly. The board last year changed the discipline policy. That burdened our teachers immensely, but gave them no resources, 0 resources to confront this change in discipline policy. As mayor, I will make sure that when those changes happen, they're well planned and the resources are there so that our teachers do have the love of the job that they all started with each and every day they go to the job.
Councilman.
Well, I've really made a very radical promise in my 47-page platform going forward. Half of our new money needs to go to education. Only once by there's no possible over-allocation, but increasing our allocation to more than half of our new money to education are you going to begin to redress the problem. You've got to fund a career ladder, not just starting pay, and you have to have parental involvement. And part of the mayor's office going forward is going to be going the extra mile to get parental involvement in all of our 160 schools. In the end, that's going to be a path for success. And I'm proud to say that I've been endorsed by the teachers union, who've studied this quite a bit in terms of who is the best choice for getting our teachers back where they should be in the classroom, all of the classrooms, and being retained and having a great career in metro schools.
Mayor. Well, tonight, Councilman Cooper says that he's going to give half the new revenue to teachers in schools. Before, he said he was going to give half of all revenue to teachers in schools. It's clear that this is just a gimmick. It's just a campaign pledge. It's just a slogan. It doesn't address the fundamental problem. It's just something he's saying to get elected. And what we have to do is make a commitment, no matter what it takes, to get our teachers to a level where they can afford to live in the city where they teach.
Thank you.
Continuing with education, Metro Schools announced last week that it gave a $5,000 bonus to some new teachers who agreed to work in the city's lowest performing schools. Would you support a similar benefit for all teachers that work in hard to staff schools, and would you provide additional city funds to pay for it? Councilman.
Oh, yes. The $5,000 bonus really in the end ended up being, I believe, just about $100,000, just with 21 teachers in those priority schools. But that is the kind of encouragement that we need to provide, not just one time, not as a bonus, but something that teachers can count on. And only by doing that are you going to repair the career ladder pay for our teachers. Teaching used to be a middle-class profession, and we need to return it to being a middle-class profession. We should be grateful that in our county here, we're going to be able to find the money to help supplement that pay from all the fabulous stuff that's going on in the county. And again, the people who are closest to this, the teachers union themselves, have endorsed me because they know what we can do together to begin to bring education back to where it has to be in Metro. It is the limiter of our growth. It is the key to our children being able to take advantage of the opportunities of this new great city.
So I know that priority schools are a critical issue in our city. We have 21 priority schools here in the city of Nashville. And when I became mayor last year, I started with a priority school task force, a kitchen cabinet. And I've spent time in many of our priority schools this year. And what you see there is a couple of things. One, teachers overwhelmed, administrators overwhelmed, kids getting left behind. And that's because of a lot of reasons, but primarily a lack of resources. That is really key to dealing with this issue. And what you see in our county right now, I don't like saying, but our schools have resegregated. And if you go to a priority school, you're most likely to see a school that is full of black and brown kids. I mean, that is what we are seeing in this city right now. If we want to fundamentally change that, teacher pay is part of it. Teacher pay is a significant part of it. The $5,000 a year is one of the things that starts to make a difference, but it is just the start. Beyond the 21 priority schools, we have dozens of other schools that are right on the cusp of falling into that category, being the lowest 5% in the state. I will fight every single day as mayor for each and every one of those kids who is getting left behind because they don't have the resources in a priority school. I promise you that.
Councilman.
How to have great schools? Have great principals. Support the principals. Get the principals to have stable budget where they can retain great teachers. All that's going to require parental involvement. All of that will require more money and time, and it's going to be the duty of the mayor to recruit, commission, retain, to be the greatest cheerleader for our great men and women who are working every day to create a great school system. We need it. It is our path to success. And Community Achieves is another great program that we need to support. Thank you.
Both of you have school-age children, but neither of you chose to send your kids to metro schools. So how do you convince other private school parents or people who do not have children that they need to invest in and support our public school system? Mayor?
Well, every parent gets to make the best choice for their child. And I will never, ever look at a parent in the eyes and say, you ought to wait. You ought to wait for us to have a better school system. Every parent has an obligation to take care of their children. Now, I've been fighting for young people in our town for 20 years. I was on the council for 8 years and voted for 2 significant tax increases to fund teachers. As mayor, I have spent a ton of time, almost every week in a metro school, talking to teachers, to parents, and to families about what we can do to improve the quality of public education in Nashville. You know, Nashville has some things to be proud of when it comes to public education, and we shouldn't forget it. We shouldn't forget the fact that we have thousands of students who arrived from the border in the last couple of weeks from detention, many of them, who don't speak English, and it's our job to take care of them. And I am committed to making sure that I do that from my hometown.
Councilman.
Well, we don't need to. I don't think we have to encourage anyone that we need this. We don't have to persuade anybody in Nashville that, of course, we need this. Of course, all of us who care about this community know that we need this. Every city in the country knows that we need this. This is how you're successful in the 21st century. It's going to be skills of the population and workforce skills and getting our children ready, as I was saying earlier, to take advantage of the opportunities of the new city. And we just have to go ahead and get on it and not be fooled into thinking that our greatness is not going to depend on the next generation taking its place, and that's going to require a great school system to do it. Every parent wants the same thing. And again, to your question, how are we going to get parents involved? We already know what we need to do. We just need to get on with it.
Okay. Mayor.
Well, I think it's important to say that in this town right now, our schools have resegregated. I said it before. I think Councilman Cooper ought to say it. He ought to acknowledge the fact that we have a new crisis in our city. It's not the same crisis we've had. This is new. For 20 years, we had integrated schools. We no longer do. And we are frankly leaving behind way too many children as a result of it. And we have all got to put our shoulder to the wheel to see change when it comes to this system.
Thank you.
Switching gears now, we've heard a lot in this campaign about the importance of neighborhoods. What specifically do you think are the biggest needs in neighborhoods outside of downtown, and how do you plan to address them? Council.
Sidewalks, stormwater, connectivity, intersections, turning lanes, a better bus system, all the things that we need to get on and go ahead and fund. The defeat of the transit plan last year revealed it was a plan that didn't provide enough benefits to enough people. The mayor was for the plan, I was against it, but it doesn't mean that you stop with that $9 billion plan. Of course we couldn't afford that plan, but we do need to afford significant improvements on transportation. And you need to look at Nashville a little bit differently. It's not suburbs going to downtown, it's each nodes of neighborhood has to be great and workable, and you may spend your whole work life, school, in that same area in Nashville. It'll take some stress off of the transportation system, but it has to be balanced. It has to have green space. It has to have sidewalks to get you to the bus station. It has to have all these basic investments to make a neighborhood great.
Mayor.
Well, this is an issue where the voters need to look at our records because it's become a key issue in Councilman Cooper's well-funded campaign, neighborhoods. And so let's talk about what neighborhoods need. Neighborhoods need sidewalks, they need parks, they need libraries, they need streets, they need those kind of improvements. Last year, I proposed a $350 million investment in those elements, and Councilman Cooper voted against it. That's a clear indication of where he truly stands on the issue of neighborhoods. Now, in my 20 years as a leader here in Nashville, I fought for neighborhoods many times, including fighting for the Bells Bend community to keep Maytown from going there, a big urban neighborhood going down there. That was the wrong thing to do. I fought against that. I'm also now proposing other things to make neighborhoods better. We have 6 neighborhoods in Nashville that have been left behind. They're owned by MDHA. And we need to go in there and make investments so that folks there aren't trapped, they aren't left behind. We need to make them mixed income. We need to add affordability. Those are the kinds of neighborhood investments I've proposed. Again, my opponent is opposed to that investment. Now he's going to bob and weave about why he was against them, but the clear votes of my opponent is that when there are opportunities to invest in our neighborhoods, before he was running for mayor, he opposed them. Running for mayor, he supports them.
Well, there's no bob and weaving here. I was against it because in that massive bill was, frankly, smuggled in $35 million for a downtown subsidy. The $35 million compares to only $60 million for all of schools. And there was no discussion of why only $60 million, which was only 1/6 of the total. And at the time, a well-known progressive voice, Bob Mendez, and I voted the same way against this because there was no discussion, no transparency. This was kind of pushed into the bill at the last minute. It's not the kind of transparency or financial management that is going to make a great city.
As tourism has grown over the last decade, so has the popularity of short-term rentals. Some neighborhoods have been overrun by bachelorette parties and Airbnbs. And just last week, the Metro Council approved new regulations to limit short-term rentals. Do you think those regulations go far enough, or do we need to do more to protect our neighborhoods? Mayor.
We'll need to do more. Now, when I was vice mayor, the short-term rental issue came up, and I appointed a task force to try and reach a good resolution for neighborhoods, for everyone involved. And we didn't get there because the state preempted much of the work that we were trying to do. But it's clear to me that short-term rentals have some negative effects on our community. They drive up rents, they change neighborhoods, and frankly, a lot of our neighbors suffer as a result of the parties taking place there. And so I think there's more that needs to be done to regulate them. That's why in this last budget cycle, I increased the fee for short-term rentals. I increased the fee because we needed more inspectors, and now we're in the process of hiring 2 more inspectors to go out and do enforcement with short-term rentals. I think it's important for us to make sure that our neighborhoods are protected from this kind of activity.
Councilman?
Well, of course we need to do more. You know, there are 4,000 or 5,000 STRs in almost no time at all that are legal. There may be just as many that are illegal. The legal ones pay taxes, but they're hotel taxes. A little bit goes to the Barnes Fund, but they're hotel taxes. So it shows the fundamental imbalance when the STR in your neighborhood is paying hotel taxes that end up supporting tourism downtown. The creation of many hotels in neighborhoods from STRs is also should be of the gravest concern because we need to have neighborhoods. And once you start pricing neighborhoods at a commercial level, which STRs often end up being a commercial level, well, then you're destroying the neighborhood, you're pushing people out, they're not able to stay in Nashville. And we need to have a Nashville for everyone, particularly the people who are here. And they don't need to be pushed out by this kind of new type of housing, hotel, tourist housing. Though I do understand, to Nashville's credit, that everybody who comes has a marvelous experience in the neighborhoods. Of course they would. We have a marvelous experience in our own neighborhoods. But yeah, we have to do more, and I agree with the mayor. Let's get on that.
Okay. Mayor Briley.
Well, thank you. My opponent had the opportunity to get on it at the last council meeting, and instead of stepping up and making a decision, standing up for the people who live in Nashville, he decided to hang out in the back room and not cast a vote on legislation that would have done more to regulate short-term rentals in our city. This is another instance where his campaign says one thing, he pays for people to say one thing, and when he is given the opportunity to act, he does something different.
Quiet, please.
Many agree that the lack of affordable housing is a crisis in this city. Metro workers, including teachers and first responders, can no longer afford to live in the city in which they work. Aside from MDHA and public housing, what will you do as mayor to help create affordable housing for Nashville's working middle class?
Yeah, Jimmy? Yes, thank you. Well, you have to make affordable housing central to everything you do. Every incentive discussion that you have from the city, everything that you're doing, you have to include affordable housing. Because ultimately, and you're going to have to create a separate, independent, affordable housing office that is staffed really by civil servants, that's not politicized out of the mayor's office, to take affordable housing away not just in public housing sites, but across the whole county. Our children need to be able to live in Nashville. Our children need to live in Nashville. It sounds incredible, but at the current increase of housing prices, of rents, there's a real question about that. Now, ultimately, so much of what we do is done for us by the state, is 9% state tax credits. We need to go to the state, we need to up our share of tax credits, and we need to use all the tools available to us in order to increase the supply of housing. But first, make it central to all we do and have a separate department that's professional and not political to get on it.
Okay, Brian.
Thank you. Well, everyone who has grown up in Nashville, who lives in Nashville, ought to have a chance to live in the city they grew up in. That's my fundamental belief, and I think housing is a right. I think that is the case in our community. That's why one of the biggest things I announced as mayor was a program to invest $500 million of local money in building affordable housing in our community, both at MDHA and with the Barnes Fund, which uses small not-for-profits to build affordable housing as well. And we're in the process of pushing the private sector to make a significant investment in affordable housing in our community as well. Because every philanthropy, every business, every donor in town, every rich person in town has an interest in our having more affordable housing. Now, this again is one of those issues where it's easy to stand up here and say, I believe in affordable housing. Our community, we have people in our community who worked for months, years, to bring to the council legislation that would have required developers to include affordable housing in their projects. It's called inclusionary zoning. And one council member voted against it. One, my opponent. That is a clear indication of what his true belief is about the need for affordable housing in this community.
So inclusionary zoning is a great idea, but the state was obviously going to overturn us on this, and it did almost immediately, and begin to take the reins of affordable housing in Nashville. This is the same kind of, I just want to go ahead and say it's late in the campaign, so you're going to be told a whole lot of things that are not completely true, right? And so let's accept this and look at this affordable housing plan that we're in. Up until recently, it was described as a $750 million plan, now only a $500 million, because it's so clear that $250 million of it was simply made up in that larger plan. But the trick to affordable housing is not just to support public housing sites, but to bring it out in the whole county.
Thank you.
Most Nashvillians will tell you traffic is one of their biggest frustrations, but neither of you has put out a comprehensive transit plan. What specifically would you focus on in the first few years of your administration when it comes to transit? Mayor Briley.
Thank you. Well, for starters, I don't think we actually need a plan. We need to do something. We need to get started. We need to build some things. And I have already started that. There are 4 things we're fundamentally working on already. We are working on another regional transit line out of Dickerson towards Gallatin. We are working on improving the quality of WeGo Transit. We are working on doing better with using our existing resources through investments with TDOT, because frankly, most people in 10 years are still going to be in their cars. So we have got to do a better job, and TDOT is committed to getting us the resources to do that. And then many other communities, one of the early wins is getting some sort of transit from the airport to downtown. Those are the 4 things I am already working on. We don't need a plan right now. We need to get to work. Now, the most fundamental difference I see in the city of Nashville in the last 10 or 20 years is it now takes you 20 minutes to get somewhere it used to take 10. And I know that is having an effect on the quality of life in this city, and I am committed to working hard to address that concern.
Thank you. Councilman.
Well, we need a plan. We need a plan right away, and a plan that's not just for tourists, not just people going from the airport to downtown, but out into every neighborhood, into 30 or 35 council districts, all the districts. That was the problem with last year. Not enough benefits to not enough people. We're going to have the car for a while, so let's start investing in these intersections that are unsafe. The city has identified over 50 intersections. Only 3 have ever been worked on since 2014. Let's have turning lanes. Let's have true smart corridors. Let's have express lanes. Let's end up investing in the bus system, but let's get on with it, because the city should never not have a transportation plan. We should always be in the middle of some improvement that we're going to need to have. We don't have to study it anymore. We do have the studies. We know where to go and what to do. We do need to pick what are the high return on investments that we can be making, and we need to measure time to work and time to school as the metrics to select what are the most valuable improvements to get on and start doing.
Briley.
Well, we don't know what Councilman Cooper's plan would be, but we do know how he would pay for it. Last year, he proposed a sales tax increase to pay for transit. So we can all assume that that's how he intends to pay for the transit plan that he hasn't presented to us yet. Fundamentally, we have got to get to work. We cannot afford as a community to look back in 10 or 20 years and say we weren't doing enough. If we do, our city will come to a standstill. I am already working, and I will keep working to make sure that transit and transportation are improving in this community.
Switching gears, another big problem facing Nashville's next mayor is juvenile crime. Kids are committing more serious crimes and at a younger age. In 2012, 6 juveniles were charged with murder. Last year, that number was 19. Earlier this year, 3 girls and 2 boys, ages 12 to 16, were charged with killing musician Kyle Yorlitz. From your perspective, what's behind this deadly trend, and what can the mayor do about it? Councilman Cooper.
Well, there's no greater problem in the city. Each youth, each child that we lose in this path is devastating to the community. So we've got to start working on several things. Parental involvement in schools, after school programs, but really so much good work is being done by nonprofits, such as Violence Interrupters, Gentlemen Not Gangsters, the Infinity. We need to make it easy for those groups to grow, expand, and to serve our community. You also need community impact investments where all of Nashville begins to focus on target schools, target neighborhoods, target challenges, and be involved in everyday life for our youth in these neighborhoods to make it improved. The mayor has a platform to convene, to ask, and to get involved. Now, Brenda Haywood is my campaign chairwoman, and I'm going to ask her to make the mayor's office profoundly involved in this area.
Mayor Briley.
Well, fundamentally, the first step is to accept the fact that we need to assess this problem from a different perspective. We should not be looking at these young people and say, what is wrong with them? We need to be looking at these instances, these young people, and saying, what has happened to these young people? And it's pretty clear for us to look and see what has actually happened. Today, our 3rd grade literacy rate is terribly low. And if you can't read when you get to 4th grade, you're going to stop going to school eventually and get in trouble and find these pathways to violent conduct. We know that. So we have got to do better just on that early childhood education, getting kids more prepared for middle and high school so they stay in school. Secondly, families. We know that most of these circumstances result from some sort of familial problem. And we have got to get more engaged with families at the earliest level. And I am committed to working with Judge Sheila Calloway to get her all the resources she needs to address families at the earliest time a child is brought to juvenile court. It's not because they did something violent generally, it's because they missed school. And so we've got to do things earlier along to make sure that we are dealing with families at the very basic level. And finally, resources. We have got to make sure that families can afford to live in our city, that the jobs they have pay enough for a family to be successful. I'm going to focus on those 3 things and make sure that we do more to prevent this kind of violence from ever happening in the first place.
Well, we need, for successful lives, you need rungs on a ladder that are available to our young people to have great paying jobs in the 21st century. It's K to J, kindergarten, 2 jobs. That's going to require extra investment in the school system. They're going to need extra support to go there. You need to build a path for people to get ahead in life. And that, I think, in the end, creates the optimism of our great city going forward. We're grateful to have the opportunity to do it. We just need to go ahead and do it. Thank you.
The city of Nashville is expected to officially settle a lawsuit with the family of one of the Waffle House victims. The suit claimed that Metro's 911 system is outdated and failed the morning of that mass shooting. Do you believe that our current system is sufficient to protect us in an emergency? Mayor.
Well, you're told never to argue with the question, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm not sure there is some imminent settlement of that lawsuit. It's not something I am aware of, to be honest with you. But it is tragic what happened to that young man, and it is tragic that, that his mom got a call early in the morning saying that his life was over. I believe strongly that our 911 system is adequate and working well. There are some instances where it's difficult to tell exactly where the call is coming from, and that's probably what happened under these circumstances. But this does point out a fundamental difference between myself and my opponent. I intend to stand up and call out gun violence and call for national gun reform. We need common sense reform in this community. It may be something we can't legislate, but the mayor of this city ought to stand up and say it's time to fix the broken gun laws in this country that allow people to go around with weapons of war into a Waffle House in the middle of the night and execute people.
Thank you. Councilman.
Well, of course, there's nothing more horrifying than an active shooter drill in a school, and yet that's the country, the city that we're in. And so, of course, we have to do everything within our power to make our schools safer and to rid us of violent weapons. Now, your question is about the city's ability to respond, and that's really going to be the mayor's responsibility, is how do we respond to these kind of horrific incidents? And in this case, frankly, emergency responders were routed to the wrong Waffle House. This is what the lawsuit is about. Now, there's been an effort to settle it. The Metro Legal Department has declined to settle the suit and to go ahead and prosecute it. They're going to be closer to the facts than I am as a candidate. But the bigger concern is the basis for the suit right? And do we need to do a performance audit of 911 to, in fact, make sure that it is working for all of us? Now, this is how the city needs to go forward, is are we getting our basic services right? And nothing more important than 911.
Mayor.
I'll remind all the voters, I'll remind everyone watching tonight that we live in a state that is dominated by folks who oppose common sense gun reform. We live in a country where the legislature refuses to do it. There is no one left but the mayor to stand up in this city and say, by God, we need to stop this killing from going on in our community. And I will do that every single chance I get as mayor, whether or not I can legislate it or not, because somebody has to stand up for this city.
Thank you. Quiet, please.
Throughout this campaign, both of you have accused each other of being too socially progressive or too fiscally conservative. How do you respond to that criticism, and how would you contrast yourself with your opponent on the issue of being socially progressive or fiscally conservative? Councilman Cooper.
Well, I don't view it as a criticism. I think you can be both. I think the city has to be socially progressive. And I am socially progressive on all of these things that we can do as a city. But it all depends. Unless you get the money right, you're not going to get anything right. And if you're in an environment where the controller is calling us out and questioning the doubling of the debt and the fact that the increase in debt in the last few years would have paid for like our entire police department, then you're in a situation where fiscal prudence, people like to call it conservatism, but basic managerial skills in running a multi-billion-dollar budget and our assets. I mean, just look at the properties that we have sold for nothing over the few years, right? So you can be both. I think that's the magic of Nashville. You have to create a stable financial platform to do all the great things that we need to do to have a progressive agenda to move us forward.
I don't recall calling my opponent too socially progressive, so if I said that, that was an error. I apologize. I apologize for saying that.
Thank you, though.
I mean, the difference between the two of us is this. I look at the job broadly. I don't think it's just about the numbers. It's about people. Being mayor is about people. And today, in our city, I'll tell you the people who are hurting the most. People who are hurting the most in our city right now are immigrants, right? Because if you look at what our president says about immigration, you know, lots of folks are afraid to leave their house right now, literally. And that is a key issue. That's something the mayor ought to be vocal about, ought to stand up on, and I will. The same is true for our LGBT neighbors. And I think if you look at his policy book, you won't really find anything in there about how we're going to confront the discrimination that the LGBT community still sees in our community. And on the other hand, I started a policy, the first policy in the South, that recognizes LGBT-owned businesses. And let's be clear, the most gentrifying neighborhoods in our town are where African Americans live. And we have got to do more to protect those neighborhoods with investments in affordable housing that I'm committed to and he opposes.
Councilman.
Well, on page 1 of my policy platform book, and again, I wish everybody at home would go to John Cooper for Nashville.com and look at my website, you will end up seeing the pledge that it's to protect all residents, regardless of race, faith, place of origin, gender, or sexual orientation. Of course, we need to protect all residents like that. Everything in the book applies to all of us, but you have to get the money right if you're in fact going to help people. You can't help people without money. You got to get that right. And progressivism means that you don't do trickle down and you don't do privatization and you don't do these basic aids to the 1% when in fact it's the whole community that needs to benefit from what government can do.
That is the most conservative thing that he said tonight. Some people need more help than others, fundamentally. Fundamentally, some people need more help than others, and money should never stand in the way of our taking care of them.
Thank you. Thank you. Quiet, please. We want to give them time. Another question on social issues. There has been some talk in recent weeks about the role of the mayor's office in social issues. So specifically, what role do you think the mayor has in these larger social issues like immigration or gun violence? Mayor.
I'm first on this one.
Go ahead.
Well, I think I've made it clear. I think it's up to the mayor to stand up and make sure that everyone in this community hears a voice that is supportive of that. And so I've spent a lot of time in our priority schools, the schools that are the bottom 5% in Nashville. And if you go there, you're likely to run into a young girl like I have, a third grader, maybe from Honduras or Guatemala. And first, she's afraid to tell you where she's from. Then she tells you her parents are afraid to come to school, right? So that young girl is going to be leading our city, or have the chance to in a decade or two. If her parents are not with her at school, if her parents can't help her learn, we're all going to suffer as a result of that. And so we have got to speak up and argue against the racism and white supremacy that's coming out of Washington to protect our community from a really bad outcome in a decade or two.
Thank you, Councilman.
Well, yes, let's speak up. We are speaking up. Gun violence has to end. All of these terrible trends in society that make us a less great country need to end. But we shouldn't mislead people into thinking that the mayor is going to be able to get rid of all these guns. That's going to be the state legislature. But the mayor needs to be there and lead the march and be counted. Now, in immigration, which is a little bit more mayoral, because you do have a police force here, the police, I think, has gotten it right when they asked to formally be prioritized that they are not federal agents, that the community can talk to the police in Nashville and be comforted that they're not really acting as an IRS or an EPA or an ICE arm for the federal government, that our police are here to work on local crimes. They're the only police that we have to do that and not overtax them. And so in the service of non-judicial warrants, which is really the ICE exercise, our police are not going to be involved in that. They've asked not to be involved in it because that will lead to a worse relationship with the community, and the immigrant community and the police need to be able to, and our police need to be able to work together in a healthy way, and that basic governance is a marvelous thing, and I think we all are supporting that.
Mayor, rebuttal.
One of the things I've learned in my 18 months is there are not enough hours in the day to do everything you want to. And so if you want to make a difference about the fact that we still have a legacy of racial segregation, if you want to make a difference about the fact that immigrants in our town are afraid, if you want to make a point, if you want to make a difference about the LGBT community in Nashville that is being hurt, you got to make it a priority. You got to make it a value. It has to be before numbers. It can't be subservient to the budget. It has to be something you're focused on every single day, and that's what I will do as mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Each candidate will now get 2 minutes for a closing statement. Mayor Briley, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight, and I'd like to start with some additional thank yous. I'd like to say thank you to each and every teacher who goes to school with too few resources and takes care of the kids in her or his charge. I'd like to thank the police, the firefighters who keep us safe under difficult circumstances. I'd like to thank everybody who lives in Nashville, who has maintained a sense of optimism over the years and built a strong, caring, welcoming city. I'd like to thank my family and friends for always supporting me. Over the last 20 years as an adult in Nashville, I fought every single day for people who didn't have the resources to fight for themselves. I fought against English only and the prejudice it showed. I've fought for workers whose wages have been stolen. I've fought to make sure that Bells Bend didn't become another downtown. My record is clear. I fight for progressive causes and I win. Now, as mayor, I've done the same thing. In the last 18 months, I've fought hard for people in Nashville, and we've made progress on equal business opportunity for minorities and women. We've made progress on neighborhoods. We've made progress on many different issues, progressive issues that are important to the city. I did that after I inherited a budget that brought the city to the precipice, and I got us past it. My opponent does not share those same values. His values over the last 20 years have focused on his role as a real estate developer in Williamson County. That is the fact. I am here tonight to ask you to vote for me for mayor. My last 2 decades here in Nashville, I've gone to work every day to fight for my neighbors, to fight for my hometown. If you give me another 4 years, I will continue to fight. I will continue to fight for you and for progressive values and to move this city forward. I'm here tonight to ask you for your vote. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Jessica and Rory. It's a marvelous thing to run for mayor in such a great city, to share a vision for a bright future going ahead. And we need a change to have our best future. Now, in the general election a few weeks ago, 75% of the voters said we want a change from the current administration. And I'm here to provide that change, to tell you the truth, to tell you the math, though always, and to do the math. And yeah, numbers are important. It's the mayor's job. Who else is going to look after the numbers and the money? That's their job. And all social progress is dependent on economics and getting the math right. Now we need to have a back to basics approach, and we need teacher pay, and we need police pay, and fire pay, and we need to invest in neighborhoods. And all those groups have endorsed me, by the way. Unions have endorsed me because they understand the back to basics approach of bringing a private sector level of management to Metro is going to create a great opportunity for us. And our greatest chapter is ahead. Think how great we are as a city without receiving any resources really from downtown or this large tourism space. Japan last year had 30 million tourists. We had 15.5 million tourists. We're almost unique by not really getting the benefit of that tourism space. And now that we can, and use that as an investment going forward, our future will be bright indeed. Now, what I want to ask everyone for your vote and your support in September the 12th, because we can have a Nashville for everyone that's here, and have tourist dollars go to help residents rather than residents' dollars going to help tourism. I'm the right mayor for right now, and it's going to take financial and business skills to make the adjustment that's going to allow us to be this incredibly great city in the future. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both. And thanks to our audience, and a reminder to our viewers, early voting is underway and Election Day is Thursday, September 12th. Good night from Belmont University.